You're being unreasonable, Mia. Eric needs this more than you do. My mother said it like she was discussing the weather, only she was waving a property deed inches from my face, at my own housewarming. Laughter stalled. Glasses paused mid-air, and I stood in the kitchen of the home I'd emptied my life savings to secure, trying to remember how to breathe. 10 years of back-to-back shifts at Memorial, ICU nights that blurred into bleary sunrises, double shifts stacked on holidays, suddenly reduced to a casual statement and a smug grin across the room. I'm Mia Reynolds, 33, nurse, planner, saver. The quiet glue for a family that only noticed me when it needed something. When my parents were about to lose their place 6 months ago, I wired $175,000, everything I had, so we could start over. Our agreement was simple. The new house would be in my name, because I paid the down payment. We shook on it, we hugged on it, we cried on it. Apparently promises mean less than ink. Eric, my stepbrother, my mother's forever exception, leaned in the doorway like he'd just won a prize on a game show. 38, a baby on the way, a trail of startups that started and stopped with someone else's money. He'd never chipped in on a single bill that mattered, but suddenly the deed with my future on it belonged to him. We already filed, George, my stepdad, added without meeting my eyes. The place is in Eric's name. Be happy for your brother. He's building a family. The words slid across the granite I'd chosen, the cabinets I'd saved for, the rooms I had pictured full of holiday noise and second chances. Conversations around us broke into uncomfortable whispers. My Aunt Sarah, who has always mothered me better than my mother, stood stiffly in the corner, mouth pressed thin. Rachel, my best friend and witness to every overnight I spent in scrubs, clutched her glass like it was the only thing keeping her steady. This isn't right, I said, my voice trying to be bigger than my shaking hands. I paid for this. We had an agreement. My mother rolled her eyes like I was late to dinner, not being cut out of my own house. You're a nurse. You'll save it up again. Eric needs a stable home for his baby. You'll understand when you finally have responsibilities. Something snapped. Not loud. No plate smashing, no dramatic speech. More like a pane of glass cracking quietly across its surface. I'd carried this family for years. I had stood in rooms that smelled like antiseptic, and goodbyes so that people I loved could fall asleep feeling safe. And now those people looked at me like a spare part. Quick pause. If you like true stories of grit and justice, don't forget to subscribe for more like this. And if you're already hooked, a like really helps the channel reach more people. Back to the party I can't forget. When my father died, I was 6. By 7, my mother had married George, and Eric arrived with a whirlwind and a spotlight that always found him. I learned to measure love in practical acts, grades, shifts, savings, while Eric measured it in upgrades, cars, clothes, investments. Every time a scheme of his burned down, the car wash, the supplements, the crypto thing, my parents opened their wallets and called it faith. I swallowed my opinions like aspirin and kept working. So when they phoned sobbing about the foreclosure, I didn't hesitate. I traded my dream of a tiny cottage with a garden for a family reset. We toured homes together and landed on this sunlit colonial on Maple Street. I signed the preliminary ownership forms. The realtor congratulated me. My mother cried into my shoulder. You're our blessing, she'd said. We'll make this work as a family. I wanted so badly to believe her that I ignored the flashing warnings, private calls with Eric that went quiet when I entered a room, lawyer meetings I wasn't invited to, delays that stretched past the point of reasonable. Rachel tried to anchor me. Get everything in writing, she'd said over coffee, eyes serious. I don't trust them to do right by you. I have it, I'd insisted. And they wouldn't do that. Now, at my own celebration, my mother brandished a deed while Eric mapped out a future funded with my past. Guests began to trickle out, patting my arm, congratulating him, avoiding my eyes. Eric drifted through the kitchen with his wife, Jessica, narrating plans like a home renovation host. We'll gut this first, he said, smoothing a palm over the countertop I'd chosen. Maybe knock out a wall, make it ours. I forced myself to scan what I could control. On top of the refrigerator, My mother's safe spot sat the old folder from when we first made the deal. While everyone chuckled at Eric's blueprint for free, I slipped it into my bag and told Rachel I needed air. Outside, under the porch light, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I opened the folder. There it was, the initial agreement, plain language that the house would be titled to me in exchange for my down payment. My signature, my dates, my hope, in black ink. Buried behind it, a letter from their own attorney dated 2 weeks ago, warning that retitling the property without my consent could be fraud. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, "Stop sulking outside. Come back in and be happy for your brother." I stared at the message until the porch light buzzed warm over my shoulder. And something inside me aligned. This stopped being about money the moment they decided I didn't count. I texted Rachel's brother, Marcus, the real estate attorney she'd been begging me to call for months. "Are you free tomorrow? I need help." His reply came fast. 9 a.m. Bring everything. I walked back into the living room where my mother, George, and Eric were huddled like conspirators. They looked up, annoyed and expectant, waiting for me to crumble, to apologize, to make it easy for them again. "Actually," I said, setting my bag on my shoulder and letting my voice go even. "Thank you." They blinked in confusion. "For finally showing me exactly what I'm worth to you." I smiled. Small, steady. "It won't be a secret anymore." Eric chuckled, careless. "She'll get over it." I turned at the door. "No, Eric, I won't. And you'll wish I had." I left the party to the sound of my own heartbeat, the folder pressed against my side like a lifeline. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., I'd find out exactly how much damage they'd done, and how much I could undo. If you're feeling this build, comment what you would have done in Mia's place. And if this story resonates, like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. The next morning, my hands wrapped around a coffee cup, like it was the only steady thing left in the world. Across the desk, Marcus, Rachel's brother, the real estate attorney, sorted through the folder I'd pulled from the fridge. His brow furrowed deeper with every page. Finally, he looked up, mouth set in a grim line. "Mia," he said slowly. "They didn't just cross a line. They bulldozed it. This transfer, it's not just shady, it's fraudulent. You provided the down payment, you signed the preliminary ownership paperwork, and..." He held up a letter I hadn't noticed the first time. "Their own lawyer warned them 2 weeks ago that doing this without your consent could be criminal." My breath hitched. Criminal. I'd come expecting messy, but the word tasted sharp. "But if the deed's already in Eric's name," I whispered. "What if it's too late?" "A fraudulent transfer can be undone," Marcus assured me. "And if your signature was forged here..." He tapped a page. "That's forgery on top of theft. The DA's office will be interested." My phone buzzed on the desk. Texts from my mother scrolled across the screen. "Stop this nonsense. Don't tear the family apart. Eric has a baby on the way. You'll forgive us eventually." The guilt trips I'd memorized my whole life. I clenched the cup tighter. For years I'd been the reliable one. The nurse who picked up shifts so others could go home. The daughter who handed over savings when bills stacked too high. The sister who stayed quiet when Eric's disasters drained everyone else's pockets. They counted on my silence like it was oxygen. Not anymore. "I want my house back," I said, my voice steadier than my pulse. "And I want them to know I won't be walked over again." Marcus nodded once, decisive. "Then I'll file an emergency injunction to freeze the property. No renovations, no sales. Tomorrow they'll be served with papers. By the end of this, Mia, you'll not only have your house, you'll have a legal record of what they tried to pull." I left his office with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not shaky, wishful thinking. Solid hope, backed by documents and law. I drove straight to the hospital for my night shift, my scrubs crisp, my head strangely clear. Halfway through rounds, my phone lit up with missed calls. 7 from Eric, 12 from my mom, even George, who never bothered. The final text from Eric glared on the screen. "What the hell did you do?" I silenced the phone, slipped it back into my pocket, and focused on my patients. Let them sweat for once. Let them know what it felt like to be left twisting in the dark. By sunrise, the storm broke. Rachel called, her voice tight with both alarm and glee. "Your mom and Eric are outside your building making a scene." I pulled back the curtain. There they were. Eric pacing red-faced on the sidewalk, my mom pounding on the glass door like she could knock the truth back inside me. I walked down calmly, adrenaline steadying each step. "You can't do this," my mother shrieked the second I opened the door. "You'll tear this family apart!" "That's Rich," I answered almost softly. "You didn't worry about tearing the family apart when you stole my savings." Eric stepped forward, jabbing a finger at me. "I have a baby on the way, Mia. What were you going to do with that house anyway? Live there alone with your cats?" I pulled my phone from my pocket, thumb hovering over the documents Marcus had scanned. "Want to see the letter from your lawyer warning this was illegal? Or should we talk about the signature someone conveniently forged?" Color drained from their faces. My mother grabbed my arm, voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Honey, please, we can fix this as a family. No need for lawyers." I peeled her hand off mine. "We stopped being a family when you decided my sacrifices didn't matter. The DA already has everything. Unless you want this to get worse, you'd better call your attorney." As if on cue, Eric's phone rang. Jessica's voice, panicked and sharp, bled through the speaker. "Eric, the police are at the house. They're asking questions about the deed." His face crumpled. My mother's eyes filled with fresh tears, the same ones that had bent me 100 times before. This time, I didn't bend. Rachel pulled up to the curb, leaned out her car window and shouted, "That's how you stand up for yourself." For the first time, I believed her. If you're rooting for Mia, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have said to them on that sidewalk? And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the final chapter of this story. By the time I sat back down in Marcus's office 2 days later, the case had already snowballed. The injunction froze the house. The DA's office had copies of every questionable page, and my family's lawyer was suddenly begging for a private resolution. "They're scared," Marcus said, flipping through fresh correspondence. "And they should be. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. It's fraud, theft, forgery. They could be looking at charges." For a moment, guilt flared, the old reflex. Did I really want to see my mother in a courtroom? But then I remembered the way she'd rolled her eyes at me, dismissing 10 years of sacrifice as dramatic. I remembered Eric's smirk as he ran his hand across the counters I'd chosen, planning renovations with my stolen savings. My guilt hardened into resolve. "What are our options?" I asked. "They'll hand the deed back," Marcus replied. "Pay your legal fees, probably damages too, or we take it all the way." "Then let's make them sign more than papers," I said. "I want the truth on record. No more pretending this was a misunderstanding." 2 weeks later, I got exactly that. In a cramped conference room, Eric, my mother, and George sat with pens in trembling hands. They signed over the deed. They signed checks for legal fees and $50,000 in damages. And most satisfying of all, they signed a notarized statement admitting their attempt to defraud me. My mother's mascara streaked as she dabbed at tears. George stared at the floor, silent. Eric's jaw clenched, his eyes hollow. Jessica had already left him after discovering the mess of debts he'd been hiding. "I hope you're happy," Eric muttered, bitterness dripping. "You've ruined everything." I met his glare, calm. "No, Eric, you ruined everything when you stole from me. I just made it right." I walked out of that room lighter than I'd felt in years, holding the deed, the settlement, and proof of their betrayal in my hands. But my revenge didn't stop there. A week later, I signed another set of papers, this time selling the house to a developer for far above market value. My family, who had assumed I'd let them stay, found out through whispers in the community. Rachel and I laughed about it over coffee. "They'll be furious," she said. "Good," I replied. "They need to understand. They don't control me anymore." With the profit, plus the settlement, I finally bought the cottage I'd always dreamed of. A wraparound porch, enough yard for a garden. Peace. The calls from my mother kept coming, layered with guilt, shame, begging. "Eric needs help with rent. We can't afford the house anymore. Please, Mia, we're family. I didn't shout. I didn't explain. I just said the words that had become my shield. I'm not in a position to help. Then I hung up. The boundaries held. And the more they held, the more I grew. I planted violets, cucumbers, tomatoes. I filled my walls with soft colors, not the stiff designs my mother once insisted were proper. I hosted dinners with Aunt Sarah, Rachel, and friends who felt more like family than blood ever had. At work, I flourished too. No longer drained by constant family emergencies, I earned a promotion to charge nurse. My colleagues noticed the change. I smiled more. I stood taller. I said no when I needed to. New nurses even came to me for advice, not just on patients, but on standing up for themselves. One of them said to me recently, "If you could face down your whole family, I can face one bad relationship." And that's when I realized my revenge wasn't just reclaiming my house or exposing their lies. My revenge was growth. It was living better, freer, stronger, while they stayed tangled in the mess they created. The money they stole? That's gone. The years I gave? Already spent. But what I gained was worth far more. Freedom, boundaries, self-respect. Now, when I sit on my porch watching the sun set over my blooming garden, I know I made the right choice. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury.